I never thought the love of my life would betray me. Our perfect life shattered in an instant. One night I caught her, my beautiful young wife, in the arms of another man. My heart turned to stone as rage consumed me. In that moment, I knew I had to confront them, to make them pay. The confrontation was brutal, and my revenge was swift. This is the story of how betrayal and vengeance collided, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. Brace yourself for a tale of love turned toxic, where no one escapes unscathed. Sitting at the airport on Thursday morning, I wondered why I wasn't as excited as I thought I'd be. Brittany was with my mom at Starbucks. I saw my dad coming back to our gate. Where Taylor was, I had no idea. It was a last-minute decision for him to join us anyway. My dad sat down next to me and put his arm on the back of my seat. He looked at me for a moment. "What's the problem, Bob?" he asked. "You don't look like you're about to go on vacation." He was right. My mood wasn't great. We had 9 days at a lovely home near Mount Alani on the big island of Hawaii. Why wasn't I happier? I'd seen the pictures online. Beautiful views, tropical plants, our own private pool. What more could I ask for? "Sorry, Dad," I said. "I'm just worried about the business." I told him that, though it wasn't the whole truth. Dad started talking about why we didn't need to worry. We had only 2 projects right now. One was a big deck, pergola, and water feature. Albert and Roman were handling that. The other job, the McKinseys, was smaller, a deck and railing. The problem was the McKinseys. They complained about every small thing. If it were up to me, I wouldn't have taken that project, but Taylor sold it, and now we were stuck. I looked down the concourse and saw my beautiful wife, Brittany, with my mom and brother, Taylor. They were chatting and laughing, holding their expensive Starbucks drinks. No, I thought. The business wasn't the real problem. Something felt off between Brittany and me. This Hawaii trip began as a getaway for just the 2 of us. Then my mom found out and turned it into a family vacation. I glanced at my big brother Taylor moving through the airport without a care in the world. He was supposed to bring his latest girlfriend, but that didn't work out. He almost stayed home to manage the business, but my mom talked him into coming alone at the last minute. Honestly, I couldn't say I was glad he was here. Lost in thought, I didn't hear the boarding announcement. "Tim!" Brittany grabbed my arm. "We're boarding! Come on!" She pulled me up, and we walked towards the plane. That uneasy feeling lingered. I couldn't figure out why, but I knew something was not quite right. School had always been hard for me. My early memories were not good. Frustration and failure were what I associated with school. While other kids got better at reading, writing, and learning words, I was stuck. Reading was tough. Now I know I have dyslexia, but back then, there was no diagnosis. "Some children are just slower," my teacher said. I would see the disappointment in my mother's eyes after each parent-teacher meeting. At one point, they talked about putting me in special education. By then, I knew it was for kids with serious problems. Thankfully, that idea was abandoned. Reading for me was slow. I ended up memorizing words. I couldn't sound them out, so I remembered them. Think of it like a stop sign. We all know the shape and color and what it means. That's how I read. It took much longer. For me, reading for fun was out of the question. In the backdrop of my school struggles was my brother, Taylor. School for him was easy and life seemed easy too. He was smart, the star athlete, and fun to be around. My parents were proud of him and praised him often, especially my mom. Even as a kid, it was clear I was a letdown to my mother. My dad was always calm about me and most things, not my mom. She measured her success by her children's achievements. Naturally, she was drawn to Taylor. By high school, the gap between my brother and me was obvious. He was the popular athlete, and I was the quiet, gloomy younger brother. I was a good athlete, but not as respected as my tall, charming older brother. Taylor's senior year, my sophomore year, he was a football team captain. He got a scholarship to a small but prestigious college in the East. Meanwhile, I played junior varsity football, was on the track team, and wrestled varsity. But my parents rarely missed Taylor's football games. My wrestling matches? They were seldom there. My senior year, I placed 4th in the state at 156 pounds, a decent accomplishment. My dad showed up for the tournament, but not my mom. It'd be hard to call Taylor and me buddies. Sometimes I'd get involved with him and his popular friends, but he rarely invited me. In our family, Taylor was the star. I was in the background. My mom was the driving force in our family. She wore the pants. My easygoing dad just went along. This was especially true because of our family business, designing outdoor spaces. Originally, it was called Frank Boucher Landscaping, run by my dad with a few seasonal workers. When my mom joined, everything changed. We took bigger projects, did more construction, hired more people, and expanded the business. My mom even thought we needed a new name to match our growth. She was right. My mom had her flaws, but she was smart and driven. Though my dad was the president on paper, my mom ran things through high school. Taylor and I worked for DOS, a company that designed outdoor areas. We worked on weekends, during vacations, and all summer long. I enjoyed this job. Since I had trouble reading, I learned things differently. I focused really hard on each task. This helped me in our family business. Designing outdoor spaces was one of the few things I did better than Taylor. When we worked together, it was like a contest. Who was faster? Who was stronger? Soon, I started winning these contests often. This really upset Taylor. His younger, smaller brother was doing better than him. He said the work was for blue-collar people and that he was a white-collar type. He thought the work was beneath him. The summer I finished high school, Taylor stayed back east for an internship. I worked for our family business that summer. I have to admit, I felt less stressed without Taylor around. My plan was to go to community college in the fall and keep working for the family business. By the end of the summer, I was leading a crew alone. My dad was in charge of the landscaping crew, and Roman, our grumpy longtime worker, led the construction crew. My mom ran the business from the home office. The office was in a shop on our large 3-acre property. We had a new family home there and an older empty house that used to be the original home. The land was very valuable in Central Oregon. During high school, I had a few girlfriends, but nothing serious. I was always known as Taylor's little brother. So I started thinking of myself that way, too. My confidence with girls wasn't very high. Some buddies from high school also went to the local community college with me. The social life at community college wasn't as exciting as what our friends at universities in the Willamette Valley experienced. They had parties, fraternities and sororities, football games and dances. My friends and I often visited them on weekends to get a taste of the real college life. We'd head home later, usually hungover and a bit sad about living at home and going to a local school. One weekend, we went to a party in Eugene at a big bar just outside town. You paid an entrance fee and could drink keg beer until it was gone. My friends and I lost each other in the crowd, so I found a spot at the end of the bar. Staying there had its perks. I didn't have to wait in long lines for beer, and I could see everyone passing by. I noticed a tall blonde girl wearing a tight yellow sweater. She was a bit overweight, but looked good. I asked if I could help her get a beer. She looked at me with a half smile, then finally said yes. I told her to take my spot while I got the beer from the bartender. When I came back, a tall guy was talking to her. I handed her the beer and stepped in front of him. He told me to move because he was talking to Brittany. I gave him a challenging stare, something I learned from wrestling. He backed down and walked away. I introduced myself to Brittany, and she smiled more openly now. We shook hands, her soft hand contrasting with my rough, calloused one. We started talking, and I learned she was studying graphic design. She seemed a bit disappointed when she found out I lived in Central Oregon and wasn't going to her university. As the evening went on, it got louder and more crowded. I moved closer to Brittany to hear her better. At some point, I lightly held her waist. We felt close, even as the party went wild around us. A bit later, an announcement was made saying the buses back to campus were leaving. Brittany said she had to go and looked at me. We both stood there, surprised that our nice evening was ending so suddenly. I said, "Brittany," and she looked at me. "It was nice meeting you," I said, stammering a bit, unsure of what to say next. "Here," she said, "give me your phone." I handed it over, and she added a new contact, Britt. She quickly hugged me, gave me a peck on the lips, and hurried towards the buses. She looked back once, smiling, blew me a kiss, and was gone. That night had been great. I thought about Brittany all week. She had a pretty face and lovely blonde hair. She was a bit on the heavier side, but not too much, just my type. I had classes all day, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and on Tuesday, Thursday, and sometimes Saturday, I worked at the family business. The Tuesday after meeting Brittany, I was working on a hardscape project in Sisters. Roman Crowell was leading the project. He had worked with my dad for years and was very skilled, but he could be a jerk. He always treated me and Taylor poorly. Once in high school, Taylor and I went to our dad and begged him to fire Roman. Dad didn't listen. He said Roman was the best employee we had, never late, never sick, knew the business well, and was loyal. "It's him or us," Taylor said. "I think McDonald's is hiring," Dad replied without even looking up from his paperwork that Tuesday. I guess I was daydreaming about Brittany because Roman snapped at me. "Pay attention," he shouted. A stack of pavers almost fell on my foot. "You're at a job site, not at home. Pay attention. It's dangerous if you're not thinking about the job," he scolded me. He made me mad. Who did he think he was, bossing me around? Later, I realized he was right. Someone could get hurt. I decided to apologize. "Roman, I'm sorry I messed up today," I said. He just stared at me with a serious look. That was it. Oh well, the guy was still a jerk. Later that week, I texted Brittany. I asked how her week was going and told her my friends and I were heading to Eugene this weekend. I asked if she had any plans. By Thursday night, I hadn't heard back. I was feeling a bit down, but then Friday morning she messaged me. "Hey, big party at the Commons Saturday night. I'll wait for you. See you there." My spirits lifted. My friends and I planned to go to the football game on Saturday, and now we knew where the party was. When we arrived at the Commons, it was packed. Tents and canopies were everywhere. You paid a flat fee to get in and got a wristband for the keg beer. I wondered how I would find Brittany in the crowd. I didn't need to worry. Within 10 minutes, she found me. She greeted me with a big hug, pressing herself against me. I could tell she had a few drinks. I took a moment to look at Brittany, holding her hands and taking her in. Beautiful blonde hair, a pretty, happy face, bright red lipstick. She was still a bit heavy, but that was okay. She was wearing a bright red, low-cut, tight top. I stared at her shirt for a moment, too long. "Easy, big boy," she said, noticing my look. "Try to keep eye contact," she laughed. "Sorry," I replied and nodded toward her shirt. She laughed again, grabbed my hand, and we headed happily into the party. We had a great time. I learned Brittany was majoring in graphic design with a minor in computer science. She must be smart, I thought. I knew a lot of the people there, and everything was positive. We hung out with her friends for a while, and I met some new people. As we stood there, a bigger guy walked up and hovered around us. Suddenly, I recognized him. He played for the university football team. His name was Confronting Mims. I remembered him from high school. We beat his team, but he was the star. Now he was here, tall, broad, and muscular, about 6 feet, 2 inches. Brittany asked me to get her another beer. It took about 10 minutes. When I came back, she was talking to Mims. As I walked up, she left him and came back to me. He gave me a look and walked away. "What was that about?" I asked. She was quiet for a moment, then shook her head like it didn't matter. I let it go. The good feeling of the party returned, and I forgot about that odd moment. The party wound down. It was late and the kegs were empty. Brittany and I found a dark, quiet corner of the parking lot. We started kissing. Both of us had drunk quite a bit, but we weren't drunk. We continued kissing. "Where are you staying tonight?" she asked, a bit out of breath. I wondered if she was inviting me over. "I'm staying on the floor of a friend's dorm room," I said. "That's too bad," she said. "I don't want our first time to be in some dingy alley." She looked around at where we were. "I'd get in big trouble if I tried to sneak you into my sorority room," she told me. "Walk me home," she asked. We walked through the dark campus streets to her sorority house. She held my arm tightly and walked close to my side. I felt excited the whole way. When we got to the big brick sorority house, we hugged and kissed for a few minutes. "I guess I should go in," she finally said. I nodded. "Call me this week," she said. "I can't wait to see you again," she added. "And next time, let's figure out this privacy thing," she said with a laugh. I felt great driving home with my friends that Sunday. It felt like there was something real between me and Brittany. During the week, Brittany called and told me about the campus party this weekend. I told her I'd meet her there. We didn't talk about motels, privacy, or anything from last weekend. But I knew this weekend, I wanted us to be alone. I was upbeat and unusually outgoing during the drive to Eugene. That night, my 2 buddies and I headed to the party. The party was at one of the bigger frat houses. It was packed with people. I wandered around the big house feeling confident that Brittany would find me like she did last week. The frat house had a huge main floor where most of the party took place. Outside, the yard was also full of people. There was a basement and a big staircase going up to the second floor. With a beer in hand, I moved slowly through the party, looking for Brittany's blonde hair. I must have been there for half an hour and still no sign of her. I saw a group of girls, some of whom I had met through Brittany. I walked up to them. "Hey, Erin," I said to a petite redhead. "Have you seen Brittany around?" "Brittany Robinson?" she asked. I nodded with a smile. "Yeah, I know she's here. We all came over from the sorority together, but I haven't seen her lately," Erin said, glancing back at the frat house. "Got it. Thanks," I told her and walked away. I decided to text Brittany. "Hey, where are you?" I sent her. I kept walking around, wondering why I hadn't seen her yet. I checked the main floor and outside again. I saw my two buddies with some girls outside. I looked at the big deck in the backyard. It was about 24 inches high, and the wooden boards were bending under the weight of the people. As I was looking at the deck, Cody, one of my friends, came up to me. "Hey, I saw the girl you've been hanging out with," he said. "The blonde with the big, eyes." I nodded, signaling him to go on. "She was with that guy we played football against from Redmond. He plays college ball here now. Sims, I think," Cody said. "Mims," I corrected him under my breath. "Where did you see them?" "In the frat house," he said, pointing back over his shoulder. "It looked like they were going upstairs." "Okay, thanks, Cody," I told him, trying to stay casual. I walked inside, feeling a mix of jealousy and anger. I went upstairs. There was a long hallway with rooms on either side. Most of the rooms had their doors open, with people having small room parties. A few rooms had closed doors. I walked down the hallway, nodding to people I knew. Still no sign of Brittany. Near the end of the hallway, I saw a door slightly open and peeked inside. There were a few people in the room, and on a couch with her blonde hair and curvy figure was Brittany, kissing Donovan Mims. I pushed the door open a bit more and stepped inside. "There you are, Brittany," I said calmly, hiding my anger. "I tried to text you. Maybe your phone was off or you were busy," I said, looking at Mims. Then I turned and left. I thought about leaving the party, but then I thought, why should I leave? I decided to stay and have a good time, maybe get a little drunk. I forced myself to act happy and social, even though I felt angry inside. Angry at Mims, angry at Brittany, and most of all, angry at myself for caring so much. The rest of the party was uneventful. I saw Brittany looking my way a few times, but I ignored her and ended up having a decent time. Much later, as my buddies and I were leaving, we walked by Brittany and her sorority friends. "Timothy!" she called out. Without looking back, I waved my hand. "See ya," I said. That was the last I saw of Brittany for a long time. I still went to parties in Eugene now and then, but less often. A few times I saw her at a party or event, usually with Mims. Life moved on and thoughts of Brittany faded. Yet, deep down, a small part of me still thought about her. 6 years later, my crew and I arrived at a big outdoor job site in Redmond. It was me, Albert, and Jimmy, Albert's nephew. We had to tear down an old cedar deck, clear some overgrown plants, level the ground, and then put in a mix of paving stones and ground-level decking. We would also add a patio cover. This job cost $54,000. Surprisingly, this was just an average job for our family business, which had grown a lot over the past few years. I believe I had something to do with that growth. I went to community college for a year, but I realized that I loved working with the family business more. One of my skills was looking at a job and quickly figuring out how to break it into smaller tasks. This came in handy, even though I wasn't as skilled with tools as Roman or my dad. I had strong organizational skills and a nearly perfect memory. Sometimes even Roman, who was usually grumpy, would give me a small compliment. If we had a corporate setup, my mom would be the CEO. She handled scheduling, money, and marketing. My dad or I would meet customers, make sales calls, and create bids. I didn't enjoy this part of the job as much. Once the job was sold, my mom would organize the materials and the workers. We had 3 crews. I usually worked with Albert. My dad specialized in landscaping and had his own team. Roman, our lead carpenter, ran the 3rd crew. Roman was very talented, even if he wasn't always pleasant. Sometimes we would all work together, but we found it more efficient to work separately. Our business was on valuable land within city limits. My grandpa had bought the land for a few $1,000s. There's a family trust to keep the land in the family. The office and shop were at the front, near the main road. Behind the shop, there was a small, empty house where my parents had lived when they first got married. The larger house, where I grew up and where my parents still live, was up the hill. It was never completely finished, and I often helped with different tasks like installing doors and painting. When I was in community college, I bought my own small house near downtown. It needed a lot of work, but was affordable at the time. Its value has gone up a lot since then. Another reason I bought it was to have some independence, especially from my mom. Working with family all day made me want my own space. My mom often bragged about my brother Taylor, which made me feel a bit overlooked. My dad, who was more relaxed, didn't notice as much. That morning, Albert, Jimmy, and I had almost finished tearing down the old deck at a job in Redmond when my mom called. "Tim, can you go give a bid on a project in Pinecone Springs?" she asked. I was dirty and about to finish the teardown. "Now?" I asked. "The Eldridges are leaving for California this afternoon," she replied. "It's a big job and they want to explain their ideas." "Where's Dad? Can he do it?" I asked. "No, they're all down in Sunridge," she told me. Shoot, I thought. I didn't like this part of the job. But I headed to Pinecone Springs to meet Carlton Eldridge. He was some wealthy guy, I guessed. 2.5 hours later, I got back to the job in Redmond. Carlton turned out to be a nice guy, an attorney who lived mostly in Silicon Valley. He obviously had money, but was friendly. We talked, I took notes, measured, and told him we'd email him the bid. When I got back, I could tell something was up. Jimmy was smiling and laughing, and Albert was scowling at him. They looked like they had done some work, though. "What's going on?" I asked Albert. Jimmy was still grinning. Albert just shook his head and looked at Jimmy. "Tell him," he said. "Boss," Jimmy said in a loud whisper, "you've got to see next door." He pointed toward the fence on the south side. "There's a blonde woman in a swimsuit," he said. I glanced toward the fence. I could guess what had happened. Jimmy was probably up on a ladder tearing down the old overhead structure and had a clear view into the neighbor's yard. Someone was probably out enjoying the sun. All innocent, unless it was someone too young. That would be bad for our business. "Why don't you guys take a lunch break?" I told them. I decided to see if I needed to talk to the neighbor. Who knows what they might have seen or heard from Jimmy. I rang the neighbor's doorbell. I waited. Nothing. I tried again. Just as I was about to leave, there was movement at the door. A blonde woman in large sunglasses and a cover-up answered. "Hello, ma'am," I began. "I'm with Doss, and we're working on your neighbor's house. I wanted to make sure we're not disturbing you." She was quiet for a moment, studying me. "Timothy?" she asked. I thought I recognized the voice. "Yes," I said, hesitating. She took off her sunglasses. I recognized her. "Brittany Robinson?" I said, surprised. "Wow, it's been a while. Is this your house?" "Yes, well, I'm house-sitting, but this is where I live," she said. "But it's now Brittany Mims, at least for about another month," she told me. I stood there for a minute, surprised at this chance meeting. I hadn't seen Brittany in years, and I didn't even know she lived in Central Oregon. I thought she was married to Donovan, but her comment about "at least for another month" made me curious. We chatted for a bit, catching up. I told her we'd be working on this job for a few weeks and assured her we'd try not to bother her. "Tim," she said, "don't worry, you won't bother me." And she gave me a big smile. Her words stuck with me all day. I kept thinking about Britney and wondered about her marriage. I also couldn't help but think about how she looked. According to Jimmy, she looked pretty good. We kept working on her neighbor's project. I saw her once driving a black Outback and waved at her. Other than that, there was no sign of Brittany all week. On Friday afternoons, I usually let the guys off early but still paid them. This Friday, I did the same. I was in the backyard looking at our progress and planning for the next week. In deep thought, I was interrupted. "Hey, Tim." It was Brittany speaking over the fence. "It's almost 5 o'clock. How about a beer?" she asked. I hesitated at first. My initial thought was to say no, but then I reconsidered. There was still some interest in her. What happened in college was a long time ago. While I was thinking it over, she called out again. "Tim, it's just a beer. I promise I won't bite," she said with a laugh. "Sure," I agreed. She let me in through a side gate. She was dressed casually in shorts and a t-shirt. No swimwear like Jimmy mentioned, but she still looked good. We sat at a patio table on her back deck. Next to the deck was a lounge chair. Brittany went through a set of French doors to get the beers. I looked around at the house and yard. It was nice. I knew she was house-sitting. Whoever owned it must be doing well. "Tim, I've got to say, you look really good," she told me. I actually felt pretty good too. I was fit from work and went to the gym regularly. The sun had lightened my hair and I had a tan. "Thanks, Brittany," I said, looking at her. "You've always looked good, and I think you've gotten even better with time," I added. She smiled at that. "I still need to lose some weight," she said, and looked down at her body. I followed her gaze. She laughed. "What?" I asked, confused. "You always liked looking at me," she laughed, "and I just caught you again." She smiled and looked right into my eyes. I was embarrassed. "Sorry," I told her. "It's okay," she said, still smiling. "It's nice to know I can still catch a man's eye." "Sorry, I'm just teasing," she added. Things settled down after that. We had a normal conversation and caught up on what we had been doing since college. I told her about our family business designing outdoor spaces and my role in it. She said she was an independent web designer and asked who did our website. It was a friendly and comfortable talk with a mix of personal and business topics. I told her our website wasn't up to date and we needed help. She seemed to take note of that. Finally, she talked a bit about Donovan and her marriage. "Donovan and I got married in our last year of college," she told me. "He and I dated off and on through school. When I met you, we were off. I really liked you in college. Donovan saw that and worked hard to get back with me. I never really explained that to you or apologized. I felt bad," she said. "That was a long time ago," I told her, not admitting how much it hurt at the time. "We moved to Redmond near his family. He's a successful mortgage broker. There was some cheating and we decided to divorce. It wasn't terribly bitter. I guess we probably married too young. We are still friendly, if not quite friends," she explained, looking off into the distance. The beers were empty and the conversation, as nice as it was winding down. I got up and thanked Brittany for the beer. There was a slight awkwardness. I felt close to Brittany, closer than seemed right after not seeing her for years. "Maybe I'll see you next week," I said. "Sure. When?" she asked, a bit confused. "I guess I just meant that I'll be next door working through next week," I explained. "Oh," she said, understanding but seeming slightly disappointed. She gave me a warm, brief hug, and then I left. Driving home, my thoughts were all over the place. This was the girl who had ended things so suddenly in college. Many nights I had cursed her, yet she still drew me in. I liked her. I remembered feeling this way in college. I wasn't the most outgoing person, but talking to Brittany was always easy and comfortable. I had to think about it all. The following week, my crew and I continued to work at the house next to Brittany's. Part of me hoped to run into her again, but another part of me was cautious. On Thursday night, after packing up for the day, I found a note on my windshield. "How about a drink and dinner tomorrow night? My place at 5:30. I thought about the invitation all night. I wasn't sure if I wanted to get involved with Brittany again. On the other hand, I liked being with her, and I liked the way she looked. I kept debating with myself. By Friday noon, I still hadn't responded to Brittany. It was a hot day. I was dirty and sweaty from all the work. Jimmy and Albert were on their lunch break, and I was studying the plans. Knock, knock. It was Brittany at the gate. "I wanted to make sure you got my note," she said. "I hadn't heard back from you," she added with a half smile. I looked at Brittany. She was wearing white shorts and a very tight shirt, almost see-through. I stuttered. "Sure." "I told you 5:30, she said with mock annoyance. "See you then." She turned and walked back out. Well, that settled that. I began to wonder if she wore the tight shirt on purpose. Probably, I thought. Oh well, it's just a drink and dinner. It had been a hot day and I was dirty. I kept clean gym shorts, a t-shirt, and flip-flops in the truck. At 5:30, I rang Brittany's doorbell carrying my clean clothes. She called from the backyard. She was still wearing the tight outfit. "Sorry, I'm a little dirty," I said. "I have a casual change of clothes. I didn't have time to drive home." "You look fine," she told me with a smile. "If you want, you can take a quick shower." "Actually, a shower would be great," I said, and she showed me to the guest bathroom. It felt strange to be in Brittany's house like this. As I was washing up in the steamy shower, I felt a change in the air. The heavy glass shower door slid open. More cool air and in stepped Brittany, naked. "Hi," she said. I hope this is okay. I thought about you naked in here and wanted to see. She smiled at me. Finally, she said. Finally what? I asked. Finally, I get to be with you, after being close to you in college and never really doing anything with you. I kind of felt the same way, but there was something else in the back of my mind. It brought back my anger and distrust from that time. Normally, after getting close to someone, I would be happy. And sitting there with Brittany, both of us naked, I was happy. But there was that small feeling of unease. Later, we had drinks and dinner that Brittany had prepared on her patio in the warm evening. We continued our pleasant conversation, now with greater closeness. I was having a good time. After dinner, all of a sudden, Brittany stopped talking and just looked at me. What? I asked. She just continued to look. I gave her a look like, what's up? Tim, we better go inside, she said. I picked her up and placed her on the chaise lounge next to the table. I looked around and saw a house that could see into the backyard. The shades were closed there. We got even closer. I loved every moment. As we lay there happy, I began to wonder what this meant. If it was just a one-time thing, I guess I could live with that. If it became more, we would need to talk. Our college past made things a bit uneasy. I was tempted to stay the night, but I decided to go home. It had been a good evening. Good food, and I enjoyed Brittany's company beyond the physical stuff. Over the weekend, while working on my parents' house, I thought about Friday night with Brittany. I knew I should call or send a message. I did none of this, and I wasn't sure why. Maybe I was just protecting myself. Anyway, life went on. Albert, Jimmy, and I continued the project next door to Brittany's. Monday and Tuesday, I did not see her. On Wednesday, there was a note on my car in a cute envelope. Hey, call me if you want, it said. I didn't call her Wednesday, but as I headed to my truck on Thursday, I saw her backing out of her garage. I stepped to the side of the road to talk to her. Hi, I said. I got your note. Thanks. She had her window down, wearing big dark glasses. She looked at me blankly. We've been pretty busy, I stammered. I was going to call you. Tim, she said, stopping my mumbling. Enough. I get it. I was just a fling. I thought we had something more. Anyway, I've got to go. She faced the road, ready to leave. Brittany, wait, I said. I want to see you again. Can we have dinner this weekend? She sat for a minute, still looking blank. Call me, was all she said, and then she was gone. I did call her, and she agreed to have dinner on Saturday night. We went downtown to a nice Italian restaurant. The walls were decorated with wooden puppets. The place felt warm and cozy, simplifying and neutralizing the story all. Through dinner, Brittany and I talked easily, just like old times. At first, she was a bit quiet, but we soon got past that. Later, I asked her to come over for a drink at my place. I started to think about the good times we had last week, but after the drink, she said she had to go. We hugged goodbye and kissed. She kissed me back with a lot of warmth. As she left, she told me, "This time you better call me." I smiled and waved, knowing I would call her. And so, we started seeing each other again. We talked often and met a few times every week. After I called and asked her out, we started spending nights together on most weekends. Things between us felt really good. A few months later, I thought it was time for Brittany to meet my parents. As you know, I work with my mom and dad at our family business designing outdoor spaces. My dad started the business over 25 years ago, but it really grew in the last 10 years. This growth was thanks to my mom. My dad is a kind and easygoing man who always sees the best in people. My mom, however, is smart and ambitious. She calls the shots at work, and even though she knows I add value to the business, she still treats me like an employee. My sister, Taylor, lives on the East Coast, but every week my mom finds a way to praise her and compare me to her. I was a bit nervous about introducing Brittany to my parents. My mom wanted a family dinner at their house, but I insisted on a restaurant downtown. I booked a table at the Whiskey Cat, a steak restaurant in the heart of the city. I wanted the first meeting to be on neutral ground. Any worry I had soon disappeared. My dad was as friendly as always, but my mom surprised me. She was gracious, asking Brittany about herself in a very genuine way. I was pleased and grateful for my mom's good behavior. It seemed like Brittany and my mom really got along well. Much later, I thought about how my mom treated Brittany better than she treated me, her own son. As our relationship grew closer, I knew we needed to talk about Donovan. Whenever I brought up the subject, Brittany would quickly dismiss it. I let it go, knowing how painful past relationships can be. One night after dinner, we were walking back to my house, which was not far. We were in a relaxed and happy mood, holding hands. As we climbed the steps to my door, I said softly, "Brittany, I think it's time we talk about our relationship." "Okay," she said, "but what is there to talk about? I love you, you love me, and we have a good life." She then added with a smile, "And our time together isn't too bad." I hugged her and said, "I know all that, but I need to ask about your marriage." Immediately, she became quiet. The happiness from earlier was gone. I said, "If we're going to take the next step in our relationship, I need to know more about your past, including your marriage." She paused for a minute to think and then agreed to tell me her story. Brittany and Donovan were on and off during college, mostly on. When I first met her, they were off. During college, she admitted to seeing 2 other guys besides Donovan. I could have been number 3. She said that if things had gone differently one night at the Commons in their senior year, they might have stayed together without breaking up. Donovan got hurt in the first football game of the year and had to stop playing. He was around more and their relationship grew. Right before graduation, he proposed to her, and they moved to Redmond, his hometown, not far from where I grew up and live now. Donovan went into the mortgage business, and Brittany started designing websites on her own. The timing was perfect for Donovan. With interest rates dropping, he was making a lot of money and investing in local real estate. Eventually, they drifted apart and got divorced. When I asked why they split, she just said they married young and drifted apart. She told me they were no longer bitter towards each other and that she still managed his website. When I asked about any unfaithfulness, Brittany said she didn't want to talk about it. Too painful, I guess. She told me she and Donovan were still friends. That made me a bit uncomfortable, thinking about her ex-husband still being in her life. But I felt like sharing this information was a good step in our relationship. I now knew more about the woman I loved. Our relationship moved forward without many problems. Brittany planned to move in with me once the people she was house-sitting for got back from their charity trip in West Africa. This was another big step for us. Brittany also started managing our family business's website, working closely with my mom. They got friendly, though maybe not quite friends. I wasn't sure how I felt about that. Even though I was important to the family business, my mom treated me more like a worker. Brittany began suggesting I refinance my house near downtown. Interest rates had dropped, and I could lower my payments. She said Donovan could help me with the refinance. I thought about it and knew she was right. I just wasn't sure I wanted Donovan involved in our lives. The neighbor right behind me was a hoarder. Her place was filled with stuff. There were piles of junk covered with blue tarps. An old rusty car sat there too. A shed, partly collapsed, leaned to one side. It was a mess. I got to know the owner when my back fence, which separated our properties, fell down in a windstorm. I told her I'd fix it, and I did. Every few months, she'd ask me to help her with some kind of home repair. I felt bad for her and usually helped out. One night, I was home alone when the doorbell rang. It was Hilda, my neighbor. This was odd because she usually just called over the fence. After some small talk, she got straight to the point. "Tim," she said, "I'm dying. The doctors give me a month, maybe 2, that's it." "Oh, Hilda," I said, "that's awful." I moved to give her a hug, but she waved me away. She said, "I'm surprised I've lived this long, but the reason I'm here is to ask if you want to buy my property and take Muffin." Confused, I asked, "Muffin?" "My cat," she explained. "I need $150,000. I'm selling as is. It's yours if you want it." Then she added, "It's probably worth more, but I don't want real estate agents poking around my stuff. If you say no, I'll ask the neighbor on the other side, but I'd rather sell to you." I thought for a moment and said, "I'll take it. It may take a few weeks to get the money." "That's fine," she said. "The money is for my daughter in Idaho. I haven't been a good mother to her. Sending her the money is the least I can do. I knew the property was worth a lot more, but cleaning it up would be a huge job. The house was beyond repair. I liked cats, so Muffin was no problem. Later that week, I met with Donovan. He had a nice office in a new building in Redmond. On the street level, there was a Fitness Plus gym. I didn't know there was one in Redmond. Above his office, there were several floors of new, fancy apartments. Even though I hadn't been formally introduced to Donovan, he greeted me like an old friend. He was a nice-looking guy, still fit from his football days. He was friendly and easy to talk to. I couldn't tell if he was genuinely nice or just good at making people think so. I signed lots of papers and refinanced my mortgage to get the $150,000 for Hilda. My monthly payment went up by $81. Afterwards, Donovan told me a bit about his business. He had built the building where his office was, along with the gym and apartments. He mentioned he had partnered with some pro football players he knew from college. I walked away liking Donovan, even though I tried not to. He seemed like a good guy. Yet, in the back of my mind, I couldn't stop thinking about his past with Brittany. I tried to push those thoughts away. So far, I liked him, and he was going to help me get Hilda's property. A few months later, Brittany moved in. Our relationship was great. We had fun together and shared similar life goals. She worked as our web designer at Dusk, and she got along well with my mom. A part of me was jealous of their close relationship since I never had that with my mom. Meanwhile, our family business was thriving. We had 3 crews busy with work lined up for months. We talked about hiring a full-time salesperson so my dad and I could focus more on our projects. My dad was slowing down a bit, but he still did great work. However, 25 years of hard labor had taken its toll on him. With the family business and my relationship with Brittany, I was very busy. Hilda finally passed away, and I had the hard job of cleaning up her house and property. I also helped my parents with work around their place nearly every week. One night, Brittany and I were lying in bed. She turned to me and said, "Timothy, when are we going to get married?" I was quiet for a few moments, which seemed to worry her. "Tim?" she asked again. "Wait a minute," I said with a laugh. "I was just about to have some fun." "Well, no one's having any fun until you answer my question," she said firmly. I thought for a moment. I loved Brittany and couldn't imagine life without her. My future always included her. Though we were young, I knew I wanted to marry her. She was just speeding up the plan a bit. "Brittany," I told her, "I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life with you." She screamed with joy, threw back the sheets, and gave me a big hug. We had a good night. The next day, I got a surprise call from my mom. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. "Tell you what?" I replied, thinking she needed info about a project. "Brittany told me you two are engaged," she said. "She's a wonderful young woman. We've already started talking about wedding plans. There's a lot to do and not much time. Have you picked out the ring?" She kept talking without me needing to say much. After I hung up the phone with my mom, I thought about what had happened. Sure, I told Brittany I wanted to spend my life with her, but was that really a proposal? She seemed to think so. As I thought more about it, I realized we were going to get married just a lot sooner than I expected, and now my mom was involved. As wedding plans swirled around me, my mom brought up a topic. "I assume Taylor will be the best man," she said in a way that wasn't really a question. I hadn't thought of Taylor in a long time. We weren't close anymore. He was living somewhere on the East Coast, working in finance. I hardly ever talked about him and almost never talked to him. "I'm sure Taylor will be happy to be the best man," my mom said, like it was already decided. "Yeah, Mom, I'll think about it," I replied. "There's nothing to think about. He's your only brother," she said firmly. Then she moved on to talk about taxes. Mom and Brittany planned most of the details over the next few months. I half expected my mom to organize everything, even down to my bachelor party. The Monday before the wedding, Taylor arrived. That evening, we had a small gathering at my parents' house on our family land. There were a few family members and close friends. When I introduced Taylor to Brittany, he was very polite. He gave her a light hug and a big smile. Taylor asked Brittany how we met, about her job and other things. Later, he came up to me with a wide grin. "You did good, little bro," he said. "Brittany is a nice girl. A good thing I didn't meet her first," he added with a laugh and punched me playfully on the shoulder. I gave him a look, wondering where that comment came from. It didn't seem fitting. "Just kidding, bro," he laughed as he wandered away. Later, as Brittany and I were heading home, she commented about Taylor. "I thought your brother was nice, a perfect gentleman," she said. I thought about that. I had told Brittany about my relationship with Taylor growing up. He always wanted attention, and my mom had always favored him. I also thought about that perfect gentleman comment. It felt odd. One thing Brittany discussed long before the wedding was who to invite. I was pretty easygoing about these things and let my mom and Brittany handle most of it. But there was one person we disagreed about, Donovan. Brittany was set on inviting her ex-husband. This made me uncomfortable. Yes, I had met Donovan and he had helped me with my refinance. And sure, Donovan was a nice guy and had invited me out for a beer twice. I said no both times, but it was hard to ignore that he had been close with my soon-to-be wife for years. Still, Brittany got her way on 99% of the wedding plans, and Donovan would be there. She even got my mom to agree about inviting him. The wedding itself was enjoyable. The whole wedding, with the ceremony and reception, was on my family's land in an open field. We set up tables and chairs with big white tents in case of bad weather. Throughout the evening, Brittany and I mingled. Sometimes we were together, sometimes apart. We were both congratulated and asked to join in photographs and other tasks. At one point, I realized I hadn't seen Brittany for a bit too long. I started looking for her. Taylor came up to me just then. "Looking for your beautiful bride?" he asked with a slight smile. "Yeah, actually I am," I told Taylor. He put his arm around my shoulder and turned me. He gestured with his chin toward a picnic table near a scrub pine tree, away from the main wedding area. There was Brittany in her flowing white wedding dress, talking seriously with Donovan. I moved to break up their chat, but Taylor held me back. "Easy, bro," he said quietly. "Don't make a scene on your wedding day. I'll keep an eye on them. It's all innocent," he said. I thanked him, took one last look, and then was pulled away by friends. As I left, I felt a rare sense of gratitude toward Taylor. He didn't often do favors for me that didn't benefit him too. It made me think a bit better of him for the moment. Shortly after, Brittany returned and the wedding celebrations continued. My observations of her and Donovan talking alone almost slipped from my mind. We honeymooned on Big Island, Kona. We stayed at the Kona Plantation Spa and Resort, a large stucco building with pools, palm trees, ocean views, and several nice restaurants. Brittany looked great in her swimsuits. She had worked hard to lose some weight before the trip, and while she could still lose a little more, she looked really good. One afternoon, we met a couple from Canada by the pool. Their names were Rick and Gina. They were celebrating their 5th anniversary. It was one of those casual vacation friendships where you tell each other where you're from, discuss local restaurants you've tried, or beaches you've visited. We had an amazing time. Too soon, we were back to work. Apparently, Taylor had stayed a few days after the wedding and spent time with my parents. We were deep into the busy season at work. It felt like I had to double my efforts to make up for the days I missed. Our family business was definitely growing. Many factors contributed to this. One big reason was the influx of people moving to Central Oregon for its climate and lifestyle. Also, my full-time work running a crew helped our reputation. My crew built some really high-quality projects. Another big reason was my mom's efforts. She was the driving force. She kept us organized, got the best prices from suppliers, handled our advertising, and promoted the company. I loved the work, but I hated making sales calls. Sometimes you'd get a great client like Carlton Eldridge, the real estate attorney from California. We had just finished his project before the wedding. I spent many evenings chatting with Carlton after work. He was friendly and really appreciated our work. He offered to help me legally if needed, for free. But he was an exception. Most clients were whiny and picky. I didn't have the patience for them. My mom insisted that we treat our paying clients well. We had a good year, and in January we handed out profit-sharing checks. Mine was nearly $40,000. Brittany was thrilled with the huge check. She wanted to buy a new car or go on a trip. We had a great time in Hawaii, and she suggested traveling somewhere else. When I said I was going to invest the money, she got upset. I explained that I couldn't do physical labor forever. My body would eventually wear out. I'd noticed how my dad had slowed down in recent years. We needed to plan for the future. She said I was no fun and seemed really disappointed. As the new year started, business continued to boom. Brittany's web design business was also doing well. She was talented, and the improved website she made for us helped our business greatly. One thing I wasn't happy about was Donovan still being her client. I would occasionally ask if she met with or talked to him. Brittany would give minimal responses. She seemed to know I was jealous of Donovan and tried to downplay their interactions, but I still knew they were in contact. She had never given me a reason to think anything was wrong, but it still bothered me. So I avoided the subject as much as possible. Overall, our life was good. We had occasional arguments, mostly about money, but we generally got along well. Brittany was fixing up my house near downtown, making it our home. When I wasn't working, I was helping my dad finish a project at my mom's place on the family land, or working on Hilda's old property. Then, in October, I got a strange text from my mom. Company meeting 9 a.m. Saturday. That was all it said. What was the big mystery? I asked Brittany if she knew anything about it. She said no, but I had a feeling she might know more than she let on. Saturday morning, I went to my parents' house. "Come in," Dad said, sounding a bit formal. "Would you like coffee?" I asked. "What's going on? You're acting weird." He looked towards the kitchen, and then my mom and brother Taylor walked into the living room, smiling broadly. Taylor gave me a big hug. "Bro," he said. Everyone was acting a bit strange, and I was confused. My mom began, "Timothy, our family business is growing. Taylor will be in charge of sales and marketing for designed outdoor spaces." I was shocked. My brother, who always thought he was too good for the business, was now back. We got along better when he was far away. Now he would be living in town and working with us. My mom kept talking about how professional Taylor was and how good this would be for the business. She even mentioned that I wouldn't be responsible for sales calls anymore. Though I didn't say it, I wasn't sure this would work out well. My dad gave me a forced smile and looked away. This seemed like a power move by my mom and Taylor. I needed to think about it. When I got home, Brittany could tell I was upset. "So they told you?" she asked. "You knew?" I replied. "Last week your mom mentioned talking to Taylor," she said, "but she swore me to secrecy. So everyone knew but me. Great. I was even more annoyed but didn't know what to do. After some thought, I decided to ignore the whole situation and continue with my usual routine. That worked for a while. In early November, my mom called another company meeting. Since Taylor joined the business, I had minimized contact with my parents. My dad seemed sorry and tried to make up for it by being extra nice. My mom, on the other hand, was almost the opposite in our family dynamics. Taylor and my mom were allies. My dad didn't take sides, but I often felt like I was treated as the enemy. When Taylor came back, my mom seemed to gain even more control. I felt like I was now just a helper. This family meeting was more serious. We sat around the dining table with Mom at the head. She was in charge starting Monday and for the next few weeks. "Timothy, I want you to make time to work with Taylor," she said. "Even though Taylor is smart and has some experience with our business, I want you to help him understand our current projects." When I asked about the projects I was already working on, she said I needed to make sure my team finished them on time. She kept telling me what to do, and it became clear I had to make sure Taylor did his job right. Once the meeting was finally over, I tried to leave quickly. "Hey, bro," Taylor said, "tell Brittany thanks for the lead on the apartment. I'm all moved in." "Apartment?" I asked, confused. "Yeah, didn't she tell you?" he replied. "Her ex is developing some places in Redmond. I moved in last week. They're pretty nice. I'll have you guys over sometime." I didn't answer. I just left. As I walked out, I heard my dad calling my name, but I ignored him. I was really angry about many things. First, the way Mom told me my responsibilities compared to Taylor's. I was going to be checking his work for months. And then Brittany helping Taylor find a place from her ex. There was too much happening behind my back. When I got home, I yelled at Brittany for not telling me about helping Taylor. She knew how things were between my brother and me. She said she didn't tell me because I was already stressed and didn't want to make things worse. She cried, I apologized, and we tried to move on, but things still felt off. Over the next few weeks, I started working with Taylor. Taylor had a friendly and easygoing personality. Customers liked that. He had always used this charm in life, but he liked to take shortcuts. He would skip steps or miss details. I explained to him how important the small things were. He nodded, but didn't seem to listen. This careless attitude worried me. A construction site can be dangerous if safety rules aren't followed. I tried talking to my dad about it. He agreed it could be a problem, but did nothing to address it. Eventually, I went back to full-time project management while Taylor focused on sales. Later that spring, Taylor pulled up in a brand new red Ford F-150. "What do you think of my new truck, bro?" he asked with a big smile. I just stared without saying a word. "Mom and I were talking and we decided a new truck was needed for my sales calls," he said. I looked at my old, beat-up truck and shook my head. Then he told me a homeowner on our current project had a complaint. We walked the job site, and he pointed out the issue. I explained why we had built it a certain way to meet the local building codes. "Try to fix it up a little," he said as he walked back to his truck. "The customer's not happy," he added. So many things about this exchange bothered me. The new truck, but mostly how he passed the customer's complaint to me. That was his job. And the way he talked to me reminded me of how he treated me when we were kids, like he was my boss. It really bugged me. As months went by, the joy I once found in my job and the family business faded because of Taylor. My mom was happy because business was strong, and she thought that was all thanks to Taylor. When there was a customer complaint, he would dump it on me to solve. My mood affected my relationship with Brittany. She was naturally happy, but my negativity brought her down. We didn't enjoy each other as much as we used to. I tried to understand the problem more deeply. The issues were deeply rooted. When I talked to Brittany about my problems with Taylor, she listened, but I wasn't sure she understood. "Tim, I'm sure things will get better with Taylor. He's still new at the job. He'll learn," she said. "But Brittany," I replied, "he can be really selfish." "Timothy," she said, "he's your brother. I think he's a nice guy. Give him a chance." I don't think she got it. It wasn't just Taylor acting like he could boss me around and giving me the hard tasks. It was that Mom, who was actually in charge, supported this. It really went deeper. My mom always favored Taylor. He was the good son, and now I felt like I was second class in the business. But maybe it didn't matter. I knew I was the one doing the best work on our projects. Yet my lazy brother got all the special treatment. I tried to snap out of my bad mood and give Brittany more positive attention. It worked a little, but I still felt like she was pulling away from me. One day, I was driving near Redmond to get some concrete when I saw Brittany's shiny black car go by going the other way. It looked like she was on the phone. I wondered why she was in Redmond. Donovan's office was near there. That night at dinner, I asked what she had done that day. She said nothing special. When I asked if she went anywhere, she mentioned running a few errands. "I saw you after lunch," I said. "You were driving down Ponderosa in Redmond." I honked. She sat quietly for a moment. Then she said, "Oh yeah, I was at the Fitness Plus in Redmond." I asked, "Why did you go to that one? Our usual gym is closer." She paused and then answered, "The one in Redmond is newer and has better equipment." I thought about how the Fitness Plus in Redmond is right by Donovan's office. Should I say anything? Her answer sounded reasonable, but why didn't she mention it when I first asked about her day? I decided to let it go. I didn't think anything bad was going on, but I needed to be alert, especially concerning Donovan. My plan was to stay positive and pay more attention to her. The next day at work, my mind wandered back to our happy times on our honeymoon in Hawaii. That was it. Another honeymoon in Hawaii. I would set it all up and surprise her. That night, I went online and found a condo near Mount Alani on the Big Island. It was pricey, but very nice. I started looking at flights. Before I went further, I decided to talk to my mom about clearing my work schedule for vacation time. The next day, I called her. I explained that Brittany and I wanted to take a vacation, but it was a surprise for her, so she shouldn't say anything. I gave her the dates and asked her to arrange my work schedule around them. She agreed. Later that afternoon, my mom called back. "Tim," she said cheerfully, "I've added your vacation time to the schedule." "Thanks," I replied. "Tim, if you'd like, I can help book the lodging and flights for you and Brittany," she offered. I thought about it. I had planned to do it myself, but my mom was really good at this sort of thing. I told her I'd appreciate it if she didn't mind helping. I explained the place near Mount Alani I was looking at. She said she'd look into it and get back to me in a couple of days. It was nice of her to help like that, even though it was a bit unexpected. That night, Brittany and I had dinner at a small pub downtown. I was trying hard to be more positive, and it seemed to be helping our relationship. "I have a surprise for you," I told Brittany. She loved surprises, anything from a wrapped present to an unplanned dinner out. Her eyes lit up. "Tell me about the surprise," she asked eagerly. I told her about the trip to Hawaii. "Almost like a second honeymoon," I said. I mentioned that I'd cleared the time off and that my mom was helping with the details. "When are we going?" she asked excitedly, clapping her hands. I told her we'd leave in about 5 weeks, so she'd have time to arrange her schedule. I've got to start a diet now, she said. Brittany was always starting some new diet. This time she seemed more serious. We were both in a good mood as we walked home that night. My good mood didn't last long. The next day, my mom called me, sounding excited. I found the perfect place for your trip, she said. There's a beautiful view, great beach access, and a private pool. Your room will walk out onto the pool area. What? I asked. You said my and Brittany's room. What do you mean? This is a surprise for everyone, but it's going to be a family vacation, she explained. The house has 3 bedrooms. Your dad and I will take one, Taylor and Mia will take another, and you and Brittany get the nicest one. After all, it was your idea. Taylor was my brother, and Mia was his latest girlfriend. I'd met her once. Mom, I said, I wanted a vacation for just Brittany and me, not a family trip. Don't worry, she laughed. You two will have plenty of privacy. It will be just like being alone. Once you see the layout, you'll be thrilled. I showed Brittany before I called you. She's very excited. I wanted a break from my family, and now they were coming with me. When I got home that night after work, Brittany was still in a good mood. She couldn't stop talking about the trip. She told me about her new diet and exercise plan. She said she needed a new bikini and wanted to start tanning for the tropical sun. I explained to her that I just wanted to go on a trip with her, not with my mom, dad, brother, and his latest girlfriend. I know she's kind of silly, Brittany said, referring to Taylor's date. Don't worry, we'll have lots of time alone. She smiled. She continued talking about the trip, and my mood darkened. My mom's actions had changed how I felt about the upcoming vacation. I began to think about a future away from the family business. I had hoped that in the weeks before our trip to Hawaii, my relationship with Brittany would get stronger. But it hadn't. We were all working extra hard to get ready for our time off. Well, everyone except Taylor. Even when I saw him briefly, he was relaxed and laid back. Long lunches and short workdays were Taylor's way of doing things. One day I saw Brittany's car going toward Redmond. I thought she said she'd work out after her job that day, but she was on her way to Fitness Plus. Brittany was busy getting in shape for her bikini. I could see her body changing slowly. She looked good. Sadly, I wasn't getting to enjoy this new look much. She was always too busy with Hawaii plans. It felt like this vacation was more about Brittany than us. Tim, we're boarding, come on, Brittany said, grabbing my arm. She pulled me along the jetway to get on the plane. I couldn't shake a feeling of unease. Something felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. The flight went smoothly, and after the usual hassle at the airport, getting our bags and rental car, we finally reached our vacation home for the week. It was stunning. There were tropical plants, a fancy kitchen, a view of the ocean, and a blue infinity pool. I kept wishing it was just Brittany and me. Despite everything, it was hard to stay unhappy in such a wonderful place. Just like my mom said, our room was the nicest. The French doors opened right to the pool, and we were in a quieter part of the house. Tired from the trip, we all lounged around the pool. My mom made Mai Tais and we relaxed, enjoying the tropical setting and ocean view. After a few sips, Brittany stood up. I think I'll put on my bathing suit and cool off, she said. That sounded nice, but I was content just sitting and soaking in the atmosphere. Minutes later, Brittany walked out and my eyes widened. She wore a very tiny red bathing suit, barely covering her. Everyone stared, speechless. Brittany smiled and said, I know it's revealing. I wouldn't wear this on the beach, but since we're all family, I thought it would be fine. No one replied at first. Then Taylor said, You look great. Brittany seemed pleased, but I didn't like Taylor's lingering look at my wife. This was meant to be a second honeymoon, not a family trip. The next day, my mom suggested a trip to Costco in Kona to stock up on food and drinks. She asked my dad, Taylor, and me to go. I wasn't thrilled about the 45-minute drive, but I agreed. My dad and I left, but Taylor didn't join us. He said he wasn't feeling well, Dad said. Taylor often avoided work. He was just plain lazy. I wondered when others in the family business would notice. By noon, we were back. Good timing, Mom said. I was just about to make lunch. Where's Brittany? I asked. Down at the beach, she replied. Is Taylor feeling better? I asked. Mom looked at me, checking if I was sincere. He said it's just jet lag, she said. Here, take this lunch to the beach, she added, handing me a cooler. At the beach, I found Taylor and Brittany lying on their towels. Brittany still wore a small bikini. I set the cooler down and moved between Taylor and Brittany. "Move over, Taylor," I said. "How are you feeling?" I asked. "Better, thanks," he answered, unsure if I meant it. We spent the afternoon at the beach, swimming and chatting. I tried to connect with Brittany, but something felt off. She was in a good mood, but not a great one. In Hawaii, you should always be in a great mood. Our days in Hawaii passed slowly. Mornings, we went sightseeing or explored beaches. Afternoons, we relaxed by the pool. We ate out a few times, but mostly used the kitchen at night. One afternoon, after a morning jungle hike, Taylor, Brittany, and I were relaxing by the pool with cold beers. Brittany said she was going to take a shower. She left her stuff by the table and went inside. "Tim, can you grab me a beer?" Taylor asked. I wanted to tell him to get it himself, but family habits made me do as he asked. I went inside to get the beers. What I didn't see was Taylor messing around with Brittany's iPhone sitting on the side table. When I came back, Taylor had put his stuff on my chair, so I sat in Brittany's now empty chair. We stayed like that for a few minutes, and then Brittany's phone started to buzz. An incoming call. Out of habit, I picked it up and looked at the screen. "Scum, sucker," I whispered after seeing who was calling. "Who is it?" Taylor asked me, looking innocent. I just shook my head and he gave me a puzzled look. "Stupid Donovan," I finally told him. Taylor shook his head and looked disappointed. He then turned, tilted his head, and studied me. "What?" I asked. He paused, still looking, and replied, "I don't know why you put up with that," Taylor said. I kept looking at him, not speaking. "Tim, my brother," Taylor said, "you have a wonderful, beautiful wife, and she's friends with that jerk. Not to mention they used to be married, and he knows all her secrets." He paused and went on. "I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but I think that friendship is too close," Taylor told me. I sat and thought about what he said. He was absolutely right. Everything he'd said, I had thought many times before. The problem was, every time I brought the subject up with Brittany, it led to a big fight. She would say she's allowed to have her friends. Didn't I trust her? And finally, she does business with Donovan. She needs to talk to him, etc. I needed to have a serious talk with Brittany about Donovan, but doing it now could ruin the last few days of our vacation. So I tried not to think about Donovan, but the thought stayed in the back of my mind. The next day was our last full day at Mount Alani. We wanted to get as much beach time as possible. My mom packed the cooler with food and drinks, and we all got ready to walk to the beach. Just as we were leaving, my phone rang. It was Albert. He was talking too fast, and with his slight accent, it was hard to understand. I asked him to slow down. He explained that our picky clients, the Mackenzies, had complained about something Yumi was doing. That's when Albert got involved. I knew this would take a while to fix, so I told everyone to go ahead to the beach. I would sort out the issue and join them later. Albert told me everything he knew, and then I called the Mackenzies. I explained that the reason for their complaint was that Yumi was following the local building code, and their deck had to be built that specific way. At that point, Mrs. Mackenzie complained that their deck in California wasn't built like that. I tried to explain that building codes can vary. They just didn't get it. "Okay," I finally said. "We will refund your money and dismantle the deck. We should be off your property by tomorrow afternoon," I told the Mackenzies firmly. Suddenly, they backpedaled, saying that the deck was fine and they just had some suggestions. On and on they went. I paused for a moment before speaking. "Okay, we will finish the project, but from now on, we will do the building and you can enjoy it when we're done. Are we in agreement?" I asked, and that finally ended the conversation. 45 minutes later, I was finally able to meet everyone at the beach. Several thoughts floated through my mind. First, dealing with the client was really Taylor's job. Once again, my lazy, carefree brother had pushed the work on me. The other thought that wouldn't leave me alone was Donovan, or rather Brittany and Donovan. Something, even in Hawaii, was slightly off between Brittany and me. And those odd trips to Redmond without much explanation heightened my suspicions. And of course, the phone call yesterday from Donovan. I assumed he knew we were on vacation. It seemed out of line. These were my thoughts as I walked across the warm white sand toward our beach spot. There weren't many people on the beach this early. My dad was sound asleep on his towel, and my mom was buried in a book. I noticed Brittany and Taylor waist-deep in the water a few feet apart, talking. I walked that way. One thing about calm water is that sound carries across it much stronger than you might think. As I approached my wife and Taylor, I heard bits and pieces of their conversation. Can't find out. Donovan? Divorce me? Taylor can't. Sure enough, there he was. I just stood at the ocean's edge trying to make sense of what I heard. It sounded like a private conversation, and I was sure I had heard Donovan's name mentioned. Brittany waved and started walking toward me on the shore. As she got closer, she looked guilty to me. She was overly friendly and affectionate as we laid our towels out at our spot. I quietly asked her what she and Taylor had been talking about. She wouldn't look me in the eyes as she answered, "Oh, nothing," she quickly replied. "We were just saying how nice this trip has been, and how we wish we didn't have to go home tomorrow." I know I couldn't hear everything they were saying, but whatever I heard had nothing to do with the trip or going home. Brittany was lying to me. That, plus the distance I had sensed even before the trip, had me wondering what was going on. This trip was supposed to bring us closer together. The rest of the day and that evening were uneventful, except for one conversation I had with my brother, Taylor. I asked, "What were you and Brittany talking about in the ocean today?" He paused and looked at me for a long moment. Finally, he took a deep breath and answered me. "Nothing much, bro," he said. "She's a great woman. I'd try to keep her away from Donovan," he added. "Why? What did she say?" I asked. Right then, my mom called for Taylor. He walked away, and I never got to finish that talk with him. The next day at the airport, I was feeling down. The trip didn't help Brittany and me get closer. I knew something was up with her, and I thought it involved Donovan. Once we got home, I was determined to get us back on track. First, I needed to find out what she might be doing, especially if it involved Donovan. No, I didn't hire a detective. And no, I didn't borrow a friend's car to follow her. I just watched her more closely. I called her more often to see what she was doing. I showed up at her place randomly since she worked from home. I don't think I seemed suspicious, but there were still big, unexplained gaps in her day. I asked her questions, almost accusing her of something. I learned nothing new. She got annoyed if I asked too much. One day, leaving a job site, I noticed my truck's tire was low. On the way home, I dropped it at the tire store. Albert followed me there and took me home. I asked Brittany if she could give me a ride to the tire shop in the morning. The next morning, we got into her car and drove there. She plugged her phone into the car's USB port. One thing about Apple CarPlay is that it shows where you usually drive. It displays your common destinations on the screen with the estimated time of arrival. When she plugged in her phone, Donovan's building address in Redmond popped up immediately. Sure, there's a new fitness center there and Donovan's other buildings, including his office. She saw me notice the address. "I guess my car thinks I need a workout," she laughed nervously. I thought about my options. I knew something was off. I highly suspected it involved Donovan, the phone call in Hawaii, Taylor's comments about their past, and her strange actions. It was all just a hunch, but I didn't believe in coincidences. The next few weeks were uneventful. Then one night, out of the blue, she said she was going to Vancouver to visit her sister Claire, Claire's husband Mitch, and their 3 kids. I was alert. Brittany and Claire were never that close. Claire was 5 years older and busy as a mom and housewife. Mitch was a nice guy, a fireman, but different from us. I also knew Brittany wasn't close to her niece and nephews. Other than Claire's wedding, I had only seen them a few times. I asked Brittany about the trip. Why was she going? What were they going to do? Why now? Her answers were vague and she seemed slightly nervous. Still, there was nothing solid to confirm my suspicions. She planned to leave Thursday evening and come back on Sunday. It's about a 3.5-hour drive to Vancouver, Washington from Central Oregon. Brittany was especially nice to me in the days before she left. She seemed happy and excited to see her sister. She called me around midday on Friday and everything seemed fine. She updated me on her sister and her family, and I thought I heard her sister in the background. Everything appeared normal. Friday evening at home, I couldn't find an ingredient for my dinner. I called her. It went straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I knew she'd see the call and call me back by 9:30 that night. No reply. I tried again, voicemail again. I started to feel more curious than worried. The next day, I called her mid-morning and then again at lunch. Same result. By mid-afternoon, I decided to call her sister. Better yet, I called Mitch. He answered right away. "Tim?" he said, sounding slightly worried. "I never called him, so he thought there was an emergency." "What's going on?" he quickly asked. "Mitch, sorry to bother you, but I haven't been able to reach Brittany," I told him. He started to explain. "Well, she stopped by yesterday when I was home, but to my knowledge, she and Claire weren't planning to meet again." I asked him, "Do you mean she's not staying with you?" "Staying with us? No, I didn't know she was supposed to," he replied. "She said she was meeting some college friends in Portland." I took in this information. Okay, I knew something was wrong. Now the story was starting to unfold. "Tim, are you still there?" Mitch asked. "Yeah, I'm still here." "Hey, Mitch, I must have been confused about her plans. You're right. She did say she was staying with college friends. Sorry to bother you," I said and hung up. I sat there and thought, okay, she lied to me. She told me she was staying at Claire's. She told Claire she was with college friends. I was pretty sure which college friend she was actually with. She would have never guessed I'd contact Claire or Mitch. Just then, my phone rang. Brittany. "Hi, honey," she greeted me. "I missed your calls. Is everything okay?" she asked. I knew I had to act normal. "Yeah, I was just looking for the teriyaki sauce. I finally found it," I said, trying to sound casual. "How are Claire and Mitch?" I asked. She went on to tell me everything was fine. She updated me on her niece and nephews and talked about regular stuff. "So, are you sleeping on their couch?" I asked, knowing their house was only 3 bedrooms. She told me she was, but it wasn't too bad. "Okay," I said. Any chance of finding a logical explanation was now gone. She had lied to me. I quickly hung up the phone. I felt both sad and angry all afternoon because I knew she was spending the night with Donovan somewhere. A few times I almost called her, but I stopped myself. I needed to calm down. I needed proof and a plan. All day and evening I thought there was no way our marriage would survive this. I felt sad a few times, but mostly I was angry. Sunday afternoon she got home around 4 o'clock. I had to pretend everything was fine and stay calm. I tried my best, but deep down I was furious about her lying and what I thought was cheating. We had a regular evening. I was quiet enough that she asked me if everything was okay. I told her yes and said I was just busy with work. She gave me a long look, as if she wasn't sure if I was telling the truth. Luckily, that night we didn't have any close moments. She was probably too tired, and I didn't want any reminders of Donovan. The next night, Monday, Brittany didn't get home until after 7 p.m. When she arrived, she seemed out of breath, and her hair was damp. "Where were you?" I asked. "I was at the gym," she said, and watched me to see how I would react. "Is your hair wet?" I questioned. "Oh yeah," she replied and touched her hair. "I showered at the gym." She watched me again, waiting for my response. I said, "I thought you said the showers there were gross." She started explaining more about her gym and shower experience, but I had enough. I walked out the back door and over to Hilda's old place to tinker around. I could hear Brittany calling after me. I ignored her. I worked on the property until dark. As I worked, I could tell something big had changed between us. I knew she was lying, and I thought she knew that I knew. Something had to happen soon. 2 days later, I was still trying to figure out what to do next. I knew Brittany was lying and probably seeing her ex-husband Donovan. I just needed proof. I was in a bad mood, thinking about everything. I was angry all the time. We were working on a job outside Redmond, and I needed to get a few things from the lumber store. While waiting at a light to turn left, I saw what looked like Brittany's black car driving away from Redmond. As she passed, I saw it was Brittany. What bothered me most was the big happy smile on her face as she sped past me, not noticing I was there. If I hadn't been stuck in the turn lane, I would have followed her and confronted her. Instead, I made the turn and went straight to Donovan's office. I was so angry I nearly got a ticket. I skidded into the parking lot in front of his building. I jumped out of my truck, not bothering to close the door. The receptionist looked alarmed as I barged in. "Where is he?" I asked. "Mr. Mims is on a conference call," she stammered, shocked at my aggressive attitude. I marched past her toward Donovan's office. She called after me, but I ignored her. Donovan looked up in surprise as I burst through his door. He was on the phone, headset on, listening to someone. "Excuse me," he began, not immediately recognizing me. "Tim?" he said as he realized who I was. I reached across his desk, grabbing his shirt in anger. I knocked him back in his chair. We wrestled on the floor, and I managed to punch him in the face, but Donovan's size and strength soon gave him the advantage. He held me in a bear hug, pinning my arms. "What is your problem, man?" he asked, both of us breathing heavily. "Stay away from my wife," I hissed, still struggling. He stopped and pushed me away, looking confused. "Brittany?" he asked. "Yeah, I know you've been seeing her," I said. "Look, Tim, I don't know what you've heard or what you think you saw, but aside from her working with Jan on the website, I haven't seen Brittany," Donovan said. I studied him. He seemed to be telling the truth. He wasn't a good enough actor to lie convincingly. I felt embarrassed, sitting on the floor of his office. After a minute, I stood up. "Sorry, Donovan," I said as I quickly walked out. Embarrassed, I headed for home. On the way, I called Brittany. It went to voicemail. I left her a message, almost accusing her of lying and cheating. I told her we needed to have a long and honest talk about our marriage when I got home. When I arrived, she wasn't home. Something was definitely up. She was up to something, and I was sure of it. And I think she knew that I knew. That's why she wasn't home. She wasn't ready for the talk. I tried to call her twice and sent her a text, telling her we needed to talk. I got no reply. The next day, I wasn't very effective at the job site. It was a big project near Redmond. I was working with Ramon and his crew. I messed up a few times and expected harsh comments from Ramon. Instead, he just watched me with a look of concern. Finally, in the afternoon, Ramon came up to me. "Go home." He spoke to me, not with anger, but with Roman's version of concern. "You need to solve your problem. Come back with a clear mind," he said. I thought for a bit and realized he was right. I wasn't helping by staying here. As I turned to leave, he patted me on the shoulder. It felt like he understood my troubled mood. There was a warmth from him I hadn't felt before. Even though I was feeling terrible, Roman's small act of kindness brightened my mood a bit. Driving home, I half expected Brittany to be there. I rehearsed in my mind what I would say to her. I felt a mix of anger and sadness. I wondered if our marriage could be saved. Was there any good reason for what had been happening? I thought it was Donovan, but now I knew it wasn't. When I got home, Brittany wasn't there. I called her, but it went straight to voicemail. I texted her, "Where are you? We need to talk. If you care about our marriage, call me." If that didn't grab her attention, I didn't know what would. I sat on my front porch and thought about what I had done wrong. Was she repeating the same mistakes from college? Could our marriage still be saved? These thoughts were swirling in my head. Just then, I heard a car drive up. I thought it would be Brittany, but it wasn't her black Subaru. A shiny white Audi sedan stopped in front of my house. I couldn't see who was inside through the tinted windows. To my surprise, Donovan stepped out. "Hey, man," he said, showing his palms as if to say he meant no harm. "No wrestling, no fighting, okay?" He said this with a half grin. "Donovan," I replied, surprised. "I'm sorry about yesterday, but what are you doing here? How did you know where I live?" I asked. "You forget I helped you refinance this place," he said. "I just looked up your file." Donovan walked up to the porch. I was confused by his arrival and still a bit embarrassed about yesterday. I asked him if he wanted water or a beer. "No, man, but I have some info for you," he said. "Okay," I said slowly, curious. "Don't shoot the messenger," he said, looking me in the eye. "But I started thinking about Brittany after our fight yesterday. I remembered seeing her around in the past month or so," Donovan added. I looked at him, waiting for him to continue. "I saw her hanging out with a guy who lives in my building. I didn't think much of it because of who it was. But after what you accused me of yesterday, I thought we needed to talk," Donovan said. "Who is it?" I demanded. He looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "Your brother." It felt like a punch to the stomach. My mind raced with thoughts, trying to find a reason for what Donovan had said. Finally, I asked Donovan, "Did they look like they were close?" I couldn't think of the right word. "Affectionate?" I asked. He took a deep breath. "I'm not sure how close they were, but I know this. I wouldn't want my woman hanging around a guy like that without me knowing," he said. I sat on the porch, stunned. On the one hand, I couldn't believe what Donovan was saying. Taylor wouldn't do that, would he? On the other hand, it made a twisted kind of sense. I remembered moments in Hawaii when Brittany wore bikinis and the looks Taylor gave her. Even though my brother was selfish, I thought he had enough decency not to go after his own brother's wife. It seemed I misjudged him. I guess some things never change, Donovan said, shaking his head slowly. What do you mean? I asked. I mean with Brittany, he said. I looked at him, confused. He must have seen it on my face. The reason she and I split up was because of cheating, he told me. But this time it was her that did it, not me, I replied. He shook his head. No, you don't get it, Donovan said. It was Brittany who cheated on me. I loved her. I'd never cheat. She broke my heart, he told me. I thought she had said Donovan cheated on her. Or did she just say they broke up because of cheating and I assumed it was him? What happened? I asked. Donovan told me a story about Brittany and the manager of a local car dealership. She was working on their website and started spending time with the guy. He was married with 2 kids. He became suspicious because of unexplained events. One night, he followed them. He found her with the guy in the parking lot at a local park. I wanted to fight him, Donovan said. I didn't hurt him, but I made it clear how mad I was. Over time, I stopped being angry at her, but I never trusted her again. Donovan got up to leave, gave me a hug, and told me to let him know if I needed anything. That's why I drive the Audi. Can't stand to look at BMWs anymore, he said as he walked back to his car. Deep in thought, I watched him drive away. My own brother, I thought. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got at both of them. Did something happen in Hawaii? They certainly spent enough time together. I grabbed my keys and drove to Taylor's apartment in Redmond. All those times Brittany was supposed to be at the gym, she was probably with Taylor, I fumed. Halfway there, my phone rang. It was my mom. I ignored it. A few minutes later, it rang again. Brittany, I quickly answered. Where are you? I barked into the phone. Tim, it's your mother. My mom answered. I've got Brittany's phone, she said. Where's Brittany? I yelled into the phone. She's here at the house, she replied. We have a problem we need to solve. You should come over so we can fix this. This is between Brittany, me, and my annoying brother, I shouted at her. I know you're upset, Timothy, she said calmly, but you don't need to talk to me like that. We'll sort this out. It's family business. I hung up, not wanting to hear more. The phone rang again, probably my mom. I ignored it and turned around. Now I was heading to my parents' house. What was Brittany doing there? I was lucky not to get a speeding ticket. As I approached my parents' house, the place I helped build, I saw Brittany out back and Taylor's shiny red truck. My anger flared as I walked up. My mom opened the door, trying to stand between me, Brittany, and Taylor. Timothy, my mother started. This is a tough situation, but we can work it out, she told me. I looked at Brittany. She avoided my eyes. How long have you been seeing him? I asked, nodding toward Taylor. Hey, objected Taylor. No bad language in my house, my mom added. Shut up, Mom. You won't allow bad language, but you'll allow this? I snapped back. Did you cheat on me in Hawaii? Or at Table Rock Park like the BMW guy? I demanded. Brittany crumpled in tears. Taylor bent to help her. She tried to say she was sorry. My dad walked up and put his arm around me. I stood rigid. Now, son, my dad said. This is a mess, but I think we can get through it. Dad, step back, I warned him. This is more than a mess. My own brother, your son betrayed me in the worst way, and you and Mom are trying to cover it up, I said. Come on, Brittany, I started. As your husband, I deserve to know. How long has this been going on? Brittany cried silently. Taylor stood next to her, gently patting her shoulder. And you, I pointed at Taylor. I knew you were low, but this is horrible. Cheating with your brother's wife, even for you. That's really bad. All right, my mom declared. Enough is enough. This will take time. I believe both Taylor and Brittany feel bad, but we'll get through this as a family. I looked at them, anger boiling inside me. Neither Brittany nor Taylor would meet my eye. My mom stood calm like she had it all handled. My poor dad looked at me with deep sadness. You have until noon tomorrow to get your stuff out of my house, I told Brittany. She hesitated. Tim, it's my house too. It's not your house, I shouted. I owned it before I met you. I've checked with a lawyer. You have no rights to my property. Lying a bit, I walked out. As I left, my dad called my name. I ignored him and drove away, gravel flying behind me. That night was long. Sometimes I felt deep sadness about my marriage ending, but mostly I was angry. Angry at Brittany, my soon-to-be ex-wife. Angry at my parents, especially my mom, for siding with my brother. But the deepest anger was toward Taylor. My thoughts quickly turned violent. I knew I had to control these feelings. I didn't want to end up in prison. The next day, I went to the job site. What else could I do? The crew gave me space. Even Roman, who was usually grumpy, was nicer to me. The gossip had spread, and everyone probably knew about my broken marriage. That night, when I got home, I saw Brittany had taken most of her stuff. It made me sad for some reason. I wanted her gone, but seeing her things gone made it real. I went back to work the next day. Around mid-morning, Roman came to me with his cell phone. "Your mother needs to talk to you," he said. I took the phone and listened. There was a problem with a job we had done. The client had a question. My mom wanted me to handle it. "You're the head of the company, right?" I said. "You should know dealing with clients is your salesman's job. Send your lazy son to handle it." I hung up. A few minutes later, Roman's phone rang again. He looked at me while he talked, probably my mom. The next morning, Roman handed me the phone again, a different look on his face. This time it was Taylor. "Tim, hey," he said, as if nothing had happened. "On the Lancaster job, the client was asking about treating the cedar." "Don't call me again," I said. "As far as I'm concerned, you're dead to me." And I hung up. Half an hour later, Roman came to me with the phone again. "It's your mother. Will you talk to her?" he asked. I shook my head. "No." He walked off, talking to her. Later that day, Roman came over. "Sit," he said, pointing to a bucket. We sat. "You need to leave this job," he told me. "Too many problems with family for you," Roman added. I sat and thought about it and knew he was right. I couldn't work in the family business when I couldn't talk to most of my family. "I agree," I told Roman, "but I don't know what to do." He nodded and said, "I have an idea." He walked away, opened his phone, and dialed some numbers. About an hour later, he came back. "I have a nephew in Beaverton who has a business," Roman said. "He needs help. I told him about you." "Do you want to work with him and run a crew?" he asked. We talked over the details. Roman also had a niece who was married with 2 small kids. They were staying with him but were looking for a house to rent. My house seemed perfect for them. I told him they'd have to take care of Muffin, the cat I got from Hilda. He agreed. I looked at Roman. I now saw him differently. I once thought of him as a grumpy, hard-to-like older man. Now I saw him as a friend, the kind of friend who helps you when you need it most. Later, I called Roman's nephew Demos, and we talked about the job. He basically offered me the job right away. I told him I'd like to meet first and see the place. We set a time for that Friday. The more I thought about it, the more I liked the idea of a new start. I met Demos and his crew, and my decision was made. Demos was a bit older than me. His crews were happy and energetic. They did good work, were well paid, and very busy. Demos's father, Drayson, had a small garage apartment to rent for a good price. Since I rented my house with all my stuff to Roman's niece, I had little to fill the small garage apartment. It was perfect. I just had one more thing to do: resign from the family business. Even though I was called a project manager at our family business, I did much more. When there was a tough client Taylor couldn't please, they called me. I handled big projects. I did designs and cost estimates. If there was a problem with staff, I often fixed it. The family would miss me a lot, and I took a bit of pleasure in thinking about how hard it would be for them once I was gone, especially Taylor and my mom. I decided I would tell my parents on Sunday evening. At first, I planned to email them my resignation letter, but I changed my mind. For my dad's sake, I would do it in person. I pulled up to the family home at 4 p.m. Sunday afternoon. I saw Taylor's truck parked there. Unusually, I knocked on the front door. My dad answered, "What are you doing, knocking?" he said with a big smile. "Arm over my shoulder, Timothy." My mom greeted me warmly. "Oh, good. I'm glad you're here. Dinner will be ready in about an hour." My brother poked his head out through the kitchen door. I saw Brittany standing quietly behind him. "Bro," he said, as if everything was fine between us. "Sorry, but I won't be staying for dinner. I told them I just came here to give you this." I handed a sheet of paper to my mom. "It's my resignation," I explained. "Now, Timothy," my mom began. Then she tried all her skills to change my mind. My dad talked about how important I was to the business, and even Taylor came out and tried to talk to me. "Look, man, I'm really sorry about everything with Brittany." He shrugged. "These things just happen sometimes. Do not talk to me or ever mention her name to me," I pointed at Brittany. "Hey," Taylor said and gave my shoulder a push. Don't talk to her that way. I didn't even realize how angry I was, but his push made me lose control. I turned and hit Taylor in the face. He fell, nose bleeding. I'd likely broken it. For a moment, everything stopped. Then all at once, my mom was yelling at me. Brittany went to Taylor and my dad asked why I'd hit my brother. I ignored them and left. The next day, I packed my truck and left for Beaverton. It didn't take long to get used to their business. Most of Demos's guys were from Eastern Europe. They were smart, quick, and skilled. I did less crew leading and more hands-on work with these guys. We built some great projects, and it was a fun but professional atmosphere. On Fridays, the guys would invite me to drink beer after work. Many of the crew had side jobs on Saturday, but Sunday was for football, not American football, but what we call soccer. I had played some soccer in high school and liked it. They invited me to play with their club, and even though I thought I was good, these guys were much better. My anger toward Brittany and my family always simmered, but I didn't think about it as much as before. I had almost no contact with my family except for answering some emails from my dad. I didn't blame my dad much. I knew my mom ran things in our family. My brother and my mom were different. My brother's betrayal was extreme. Taylor only thought of himself. But to go after his own brother's wife. My mom ignoring what he did and quickly brushing it away was almost worse than what Brittany did. She was much like Taylor. She wanted what she wanted and went for it. Someday, maybe, I'll be strong enough to find out how and when their relationship started. I had to admit I was curious. These thoughts were never far from my mind, but with my new friends and coworkers, I thought about them less. A new relationship I had was quite surprising. I had become friends with Donovan. Every few weeks he would call and we talked about everything except Brittany. Sometimes when he traveled to Portland, we met for a drink, including once with some friends from Eastern Europe. Once in a while, I would get a short email from Roman, and if I read between the lines, it sounded like it was about business. My family's business, which designs outdoor spaces, was having some problems. Time passed, and weeks turned into months. I realized I had been away for more than a year. I enjoyed working for Domokos, but I knew this lifestyle couldn't last forever. Something had to change at some point. My mom tried to call me. I ignored it like I usually did. Then she called again. I didn't answer that call either. An hour later, Roman called Timothy. He said, "It's Frank, your dad. He had a heart attack. Your dad has passed away," Roman told me. I sat down on a pile of wood and tried to make sense of this news. My kind old dad had died. Later, I learned the details. He had a massive heart attack and died instantly. He was at a job site and died before they could get him to the hospital. The services were going to be this Sunday. I felt a big part of me guilty for shutting him out of my life over the last few months. I drove over on Saturday, and though I still wouldn't talk to my brother, I planned to make peace with my mom for a bit. The service was at my parents' house on the family property. As I drove up, things looked a bit run down at the old home. This was surprising. My parents usually kept things tidy around the house and yard. I hugged my mom but ignored my brother's attempt to greet me. I noticed my brother didn't have his usual happy attitude. I also saw that Brittany had gained back all the weight she lost and maybe a little more. During the reception, Roman grabbed my arm and led me to a quiet corner. "You come home now?" he asked. It wasn't a question, it was a request. "I'm not going to work with him again," I said, nodding toward my mom and brother. No, start new business," Roman said. He went on to say that he couldn't work with Taylor anymore. It sounded like there were too many customer complaints and other problems. Roman wanted to start his own business and wanted me to be part of it. I was interested. "Let's not discuss this here," I said. "We'll talk tomorrow morning." And we did. It took a couple of weeks to set everything up, but we did it. It was hard to say goodbye to Domokos and the team, but they understood. Once we got our name out there, business began to grow. We called the business Boucher Designs, partly to honor my father's old business. About half the old team came with us to the new company, Boucher Designs. I got an angry voicemail from my mom accusing me of stealing her employees, but I didn't answer it. I got back in touch with subcontractors and suppliers I knew from my days at the old business. Everyone seemed happy about our new business. I heard quite a few complaints about the direction the old business was heading. Since Roman's niece was still living in my house, I rented an apartment in Donovan's building. This gave me the chance to hang out with Donovan more often. I met his fiancée, Lisa. Lisa was a beautiful, dark-skinned girl from Madras. She had an athletic body. From what I saw, she was very nice and devoted to Donovan. Now that I was living back in Central Oregon, the distance between me and my family grew. If that was even possible, the little contact I had with my mom stopped now that I was their competitor. We started hearing bad things said about us without knowing who was saying them. We knew who was behind these rumors. We lost several jobs because of the negative talk. Then the comments started to become personal. I started hearing talk that I couldn't keep my woman and how happy Brittany was now. The type of gossip was hurtful. One night, I was at a popular bar downtown with a couple of friends. We were relaxed and having a good time. I noticed Taylor, Brittany, and some others in a group on the other side of the bar. "Hey guys, I'm going to take off," I told my friends, glancing across the bar toward Taylor and Brittany. My plan was to avoid them. The only result I could see from any confrontation would be bad. Tim Cody, one of my friends, said, "Finish your drink, don't let them chase you away." He was right. I decided to stay until I finished my drink. That was a mistake. They must have just noticed me. I heard louder than normal comments. I heard my name called. Then I heard laughter. I took my last sip and was getting ready to leave when Taylor, Brittany, and a couple of their rude friends came over. "Hey man, clear out," I heard Cody say to Taylor. "I'm just here to say hello to my little brother," he said with a stress on the word little. "Hello, Timmy. Are you doing okay?" he asked me with fake sincerity. He knew I hated being called Timmy. "Go away, Taylor," I said. Now. That's not very nice to say to family," he continued in his mocking tone. "Is it?" he asked Brittany. "Well, you know how sensitive he can be," Brittany said in a sing-song voice. "Go away, Brittany," I said softly. "Hey," Taylor said, suddenly aggressive, shoving my shoulder. "What's poor little Timmy going to do now?" Brittany said. "You can't seem to keep your woman," she added, getting laughs from their group. I turned to the woman I once loved and married. Now she felt like a stranger to me. Was she always this way, or did Taylor change her? I wondered. "Go away, you horrible person," I shouted at Brittany in anger. Suddenly, I felt a hard hit to my head. Everything went black. When I woke up, I saw people moving around. As I tried to get up, my brother kicked me one last time before he and his friends left the bar. Later, my friends told me that Taylor had hit me after I called Brittany a bad name. My friends jumped in to help me, and the bar turned into a big fight. No one else saw Taylor's cheap kick as the fight ended. Any small chance of our family getting back together was now gone. To me, Taylor was the enemy. So was Brittany. I really hated Taylor. It wasn't just dislike, I truly hated him. He betrayed me, his brother, in the worst way. He didn't show any regret. Yes, I hated him and wished him bad luck. This anger came up sometimes, but mostly I tried to think about good things, like our business. Our business kept going, and despite bad rumors, it grew. I didn't ask much, but I heard that DOS was having problems, which helped us grow. A few weeks later, I got a surprise call from Carlton Eldridge, a lawyer we had worked with before. I had spent time with him after work a few times and liked him. "Tim," he said, "I didn't know you left your family business." "Yes," I replied. "I went out on my own a few months ago." "I wish I'd known that," he said. "I decided to do my own thing," I added. "It felt like the right move." "Well," Carlton said, "I have a problem I need help with." "Okay, I'll help if I can," I said. "What's going on?" Carlton told me he sold his old house and built a new one on Timber Butte. "We hired DOS to build our deck," he said. "It's supposed to hang over the ridge with great views of the mountains, but I think they're in over their heads. I'm not sure it's safe." I pictured the kind of deck he described. We had done this type of work before, but always slowly and carefully with safety measures in place. I doubted the current team could handle it. "What do you need me to do?" I asked. Carlton asked me to check the work and give my opinion. Normally, I wouldn't judge another contractor's work, but my family wasn't normal. "Sure," I agreed. Carlton said Taylor was coming on Thursday and asked if I could come by on Wednesday. I said yes. When I arrived at the big, modern house, the view was amazing as soon as you stepped inside. Carlton welcomed me warmly and seemed happy I was there. "Let me show you," he said. We went to the partially built deck. They were using expensive materials, but the workmanship was bad. There were blue tape markers showing where Carlton saw problems. As Carlton stepped onto the deck, I stopped him. "Carlton," I said, "this is not safe. You should block off the door to the deck." We both looked down. The deck was about 30 feet off the ground. The view was fantastic, but the deck was dangerous. Carlton pointed out different tapes and explained his concerns while I took notes. It looked like Taylor's sloppy work. Just then, Carlton's phone rang. "Sorry, Tim, this is an important call," he said. "No problem," I replied as he walked away. I studied the deck closely. There were many construction mistakes. I measured one of the beams. It was nearly 21 inches apart. It should be 16 inches at most, maybe even 12 for this job. Taylor was cutting corners again. I noticed a composite board lying across the beam. If someone walked on it, it would break. Composite materials aren't as strong as wood, so they need closer spacing. I paused and thought about everything. Then I remembered the painful kick Taylor gave me at the bar. I made up my mind. Glancing back at the house one more time to see no sign of Carlton, I decided to act. I picked up a small piece of blue tape. Walking carefully on the wooden frame, I edged my way to the far end of the deck. I placed the blue tape on that edge. Step by step, I moved back to safe ground. Then I positioned the composite board across a gap in the frame, aiming it at the blue tape. The board was stretched over a 30-inch space. If someone tried to walk on it, it would break. The clutter on the deck made it so no one would notice what I did. If I knew my brother well, he'd rush to tidy up the job site. He might take a shortcut and walk on the weak board. That could end badly. While waiting for Carlton, I wondered if I had gone too far. Should I move the board back? I looked at the rocky ground 30 feet below and almost decided to move it when Carlton returned. "Sorry about that," he said. "What do you think?" "There are some problems here," I replied, "but I think they can be fixed. Ask your contractor to look at your concerns and give you a plan." Carlton nodded silently and looked at the half-built structure. "3 things," I said. 1, please don't mention I was here. 2, if you don't get good answers, my team can fix this for you. And 3, don't go out on that deck now." "Thank you," he nodded, shaking my hand. "If you ever need anything, help with legal issues, or just as a friend, let me know." On my drive back to Redmond, I felt nervous. Had I set up my brother's death? Did I care? Did I feel guilty? After thinking, I realized maybe not and no. But that evening, I needed company. I didn't want to be alone with these dark thoughts. I called Donovan. "Hey, Donovan, what's up tonight?" "Well, Lisa is coming over and he began. "Never mind, you're busy," I said quickly. "No, actually," he started again. "This might work. Me, Lisa, and her little sister Val are going to Tacos Por Favor for dinner. Meet us there at 7 o'clock. "See you then," he said, and hung up. That evening, I met them. Lisa gave me a warm hug. She was different from Brittany. Unlike Brittany's flashy blonde hair and tight shirts, Lisa had a natural beauty that grew on you the more you saw her. She seemed devoted to Donovan. "Hi, I'm Valeria," her little sister introduced herself, smiling widely. Val looked exotic like Lisa, but was a bit shorter and more curvy. They both had bright smiles that made you smile too. We had a nice, casual dinner. It felt a bit like a blind date. At the end of the evening, I got a warm hug from Lisa and a polite handshake from Val. I hadn't been on a date since Brittany and I split, and I wasn't sure if I was ready, but I did know I liked spending time with Val. The next day, Thursday, I got a call from Donovan while at the job site. "You made a good impression," Donovan told me. "What do you mean?" I said, grinning. I knew what he meant. Donovan said Val liked me. She had asked him questions about me and was surprised to learn we had both been married to the same person. Val had just gone through a bad breakup with her boyfriend. "I'm giving you her number," Donovan said, "but treat her well. Be honest. Don't lead her on, okay?" "I understand," I said. "I'd like to get to know her better and will treat her with respect." The rest of the day, I thought about Valeria. I didn't want to rush things, but it was going well. That night, I called and asked if she'd like to go hiking on Saturday. She agreed, and we had a nice chat while making plans. Thoughts of Taylor and Carlton's deck were nearly forgotten. Almost. I wondered what might have happened. By Friday midday, I hadn't heard anything. Maybe my little trap didn't work. Then I wondered if I would hear anything at all. I knew to stay far from any trouble. On Saturday, I picked Val up at her apartment in Madras, and we drove to the Painted Rocks Natural Area. This beautiful place was 30 miles northeast of Redmond, out of cell service. We hiked for hours. Val kept up, only slowing down on the steeper parts. She showed a toughness I liked. She checked a lot of boxes for me, fun to talk to, good-looking, and strong. We stopped for a picnic lunch. It was nearly 4 p.m. when we returned to the car and headed back to town. Suddenly, my phone started buzzing. There were 3 missed calls, 2 from my mom and 1 from Roman. I also had a text message. Nervously, I wondered what was going on. Val must have noticed my reaction. "Tim," she said. "Do you want to stop and check your messages?" she asked. "No, it's okay," I said, smiling at her. "Well, whatever it is, it's not worth getting in a wreck over. Keep your eyes on the road," she told me sweetly but with a serious tone. "Yes, ma'am," I replied. I saw a small smile spread across her face. As we got closer to town, I felt more and more anxious about the messages. I asked Val if she wanted to get a beer at the corner bar. It was a cowboy place on the highway. "Sure, let's stop," she said. Once we got inside and ordered, I told her I really needed to step outside and check my messages. She nodded. Nervously, I listened to my mom's message. "Tim, your brother has been in an accident. We are at the hospital. Please come as soon as you can," she said with worry in her voice. I then called Roman. He confirmed that he had spoken to my mom and that Taylor had fallen at work and was badly hurt. We talked for a few more minutes, but Roman didn't know more details. I texted my mom, "I will be there as soon as I can." I stood in the dusty parking lot for a moment, thinking. I couldn't tell if I felt bad or not. Mostly I felt nervous. Deep down, I felt a little guilty about Taylor's accident. But that soon faded when I remembered how Taylor had treated me in my marriage. As I walked back into the bar, I wondered if there was any way to trace the accident back to me. Returning, I noticed some rough-looking cowboy chatting up Val. "Excuse me," I said, bumping past the cowboy to slide into the booth. "Sorry," I said to Val, ignoring the cowboy. "There's been a bit of a family emergency. That's what all those messages were about," I told her. The cowboy addressed me. "I was talking to the lady here, and I don't like your manners," he said with an edge to his voice. Some old, buried anger stirred inside me. This guy was making trouble on my first date with a woman I really liked. I needed to handle this carefully. I took a deep breath, looked at Val, and stood up. The guy was a few inches taller than me and probably 10 years older. "Friend," I said, using his term, "my girl and I just stopped in for a drink. She's not interested in you, and I'm not either. Now we have 2 choices. We can go out to the parking lot, and I'm pretty sure I will beat you up. Or you can leave, friend." I gave him my most serious look from my wrestling days. He looked at me, and for a moment I thought he was going to make a move. Then I smiled. His eyebrows raised, he glanced around and silently walked away. I sat back down and looked at Val. "If you'd fought that man, this would have been our last date," she told me. "I was pretty sure it wouldn't come to that. But I don't want this to be our last date," I said. "Then you better behave," she told me with a serious look. Message received. We had our drinks, and I told her I needed to get back to town. "A family emergency," I said. Val glanced at me as if to ask what was going on, but I stayed quiet. I hoped we would soon have a long talk about my family, but this wasn't the time. Driving to the hospital, I thought about my mom, Taylor, and my ex-wife, Brittany. I felt little for my family, but I wanted to find out about Taylor's accident. That was my goal for the hospital visit. And to cheer myself up, I remembered the goodbye kiss from Val that made me smile. At the hospital, I found my mom and Brittany. I hugged my mom, but when Brittany came up for a hug, I held up my hand. "What happened?" I asked my mom. "Taylor was working and had an accident," she said. She then told me about the job site. I said nothing and just listened, though I knew the place well. A board had given way under Taylor. He grabbed a piece of the frame but then fell over 20 feet to the rocky ground. He landed on his back and was paralyzed from the waist down. My mom said the doctors told her he would never walk again. With that, my mom burst into tears. I hugged her but felt no sympathy. "Do you want to see him?" she asked. "No thanks, Mom," I told her. "I've got to go," I added. My mom stared at me in disbelief. "Tim, this is Taylor, your brother. He's been hurt badly. Aren't you concerned about him?" she asked. "I know this is Taylor, the man who ruined my marriage, and no, I'm not concerned. Even if he dies," I told her. I then turned and left as Brittany started crying and my mom scolded me for not caring. It didn't slow me down. I started thinking about what Taylor's accident meant for their business. Taylor did the bids and managed the cruise. With Taylor injured, the business would struggle for weeks, if not months. In the following weeks, our request for bids increased. It became clear that their company could not handle new jobs without Taylor. Roman and I agreed not to hire any of their crew. It would really be like kicking someone when they are already down. A few weeks later, my mom sent me a message. She said she had a business idea for me. Out of curiosity, I agreed to meet her. We met at a Starbucks. My mom, always serious about work, was dressed like she was going to a big meeting. She had file folders and a laptop, looking very professional. "Tim," she began, "I have a proposition for you. I think our companies could both benefit from a merger. I am even open to selling you part of DOS. Let me explain the numbers." She opened her folders and gave me some data. She showed me their top revenue and the trends over several years. I looked at the data and saw that since Roman and I started our business, their sales had dropped. My mom remembered my struggles with dyslexia. She probably thought I wouldn't understand the numbers. After a few minutes, I gave the data back to her. "What exactly are you thinking?" I asked. "Well," she said, "if you look at the value of DOS based on past sales data plus the value of assets." She kept talking, but I wasn't really listening. I didn't want anything to do with DOS or my family. When she finally stopped, I said, "No thanks." She looked shocked and asked why. Then she started lowering her offer price. When I still said no, she began to insult me. "Do I have to spell it out for you?" she angrily asked. "Your brother would understand this immediately. I can't believe you don't get it," she said, getting angrier. I stood up and said calmly, "Your company has no value. Its reputation is ruined. I try to keep my name away from DOS. I wouldn't take it even if you gave it to me for free." Then I walked out. Our business, meanwhile, kept growing, and we were booked for almost a year ahead. When demand is high and supply is low, prices go up, so we raised our rates. We paid our employees well, and Roman and I made good money. Plus, we built great projects. 2 months later, I got a confusing letter from Pacific Trust Bank. I tried to read it, but it was too complicated for me. I could tell it was important, though. Suddenly, a thought came to me, and the more I thought about it, the more I liked it. The next day, I called Carlton Eldridge. I didn't say it outright, but I was asking him for the favor he had promised me. The following day, I delivered the document in person. Carlton called and asked me to meet with him the next afternoon. He explained the letter's purpose. Pacific Trust was the bank my family used, and it acted as the trust administrator for the family property. My grandfather, who originally bought the land, wanted a family member to own it. The trust allowed a family member to buy the land at half its appraised value if it went up for sale. Because of this, the bank could only loan against 50% of the land's value. The property's current appraised value with buildings was $2, $95 million. My mom, on behalf of DOS, had borrowed $1, $5 million against the land. In the bank's eyes, my mom no longer owned the land outright. If no family member wanted to buy it at half price, it would go on the market for full price. "So," Carlton explained, "if you want to buy it at half the value, you can. Then the land would be 100% yours," he said. "But I'd need $1, $5 million, I said, and he nodded. "All named parties, you, your mom, and your brother, have the option to buy it at the 50% reduced value. The bank needs an answer within 60 days, he told me. "Tim," Carlton said, "if you can find a way to get that money, you should do this." "I agree," I said, but I had other reasons besides profit. I thanked Carlton, who promised to help me legally for free. My next call was to Donovan. We talked about my house downtown and the land I owned that had been Hilda's. I did some quick math. Let's say I could sell my house and the land for $1 million. I had just under $200,000 in savings. I would need to borrow $300,000 against the land. My mortgage would be less than what I paid in rent at my condo, and I'd have the land. Donovan said he could get a loan for me for the full $1, $5 million, even before I sold my house and Hilda's land. He said he could close the loan within 30 days at just under 3% interest. I called Carlton and we met with the bank, bringing Donovan's loan documents with us. I ended up signing what seemed like over 100 documents. I didn't read any of them. I just trusted Carlton to look out for me. Through all this, Carlton and I became friends. I don't think I could have done this without his and Donovan's help. Throughout the whole process, I hadn't heard anything from my family. Good, I thought. I knew that would soon change. I took possession of the property on the 15th of the month, about 3 weeks away. The bank had contacted my mom, but they didn't have any information on her plans. The bank thought since it was a family matter between my mom, my brother, and me, we could handle the transfer peacefully. They had no idea about our family's issues. I texted my mom about 2 weeks before I was to take possession. I asked to meet her, and she agreed. I told her I wanted to have the meeting at her house. She probably didn't know that soon. It would be my house. I hadn't seen my family since my mom tried to join our businesses. It had been months since the accident when I last saw Taylor. As I drove up, I saw the shiny red truck in front. I couldn't help but compare it to my old beaten-up truck. I just shook my head. "Good to see you, Tim," my mom said. I gave her a quick hug. I saw Taylor in a motorized wheelchair trying hard to look confident. It wasn't really working. "Bro," he said. I just nodded back. I saw Brittany in the kitchen. She looked out as I walked in but didn't say anything. "So, is this a social call?" my mom asked. "No, it's business today," I said. "Oh," my mom said, surprised. "Go on." "On the 15th of this month, I will take possession of this land, the buildings, and this house," I told them. There was a long pause. "That's not possible," my mom finally said. "Your grandfather has it in a trust. The bank takes care of that," she added. I then told her about the letter from Pacific Trust and the terms of the loan. I explained that the family trust allowed a family member to buy the land for 50% of its value if it came up for sale. "But we don't owe that much on this land," she objected. "I haven't taken out a loan against the property in months. How can that be?" She looked around, searching for an answer. All of a sudden, all eyes were on Taylor. "You didn't borrow any money, did you?" she asked her favorite son. "I just needed a new pickup with handicap controls," he said, almost whining. "They get expensive with all those accessories." My mom just shook her head. "I will go down to the bank tomorrow and work this out," she claimed firmly. "Mom," I said quietly, "it's done. I've already signed all the documents. As of the 15th, this is mine." I stood silently. Suddenly, with rage in her eyes, my mom turned toward me. "Get out!" she shouted, pointing to the door. "You've betrayed this family and turned your back on our business. Get out of my house!" I left, but I knew I'd be back. A week later, I received a humble phone call from my mom. It sounded like she had talked to the bankers. "Tim," my mom said quietly, "I'm hoping you can give me a couple of days to figure out where I'm going to live. Can you do that for me?" she asked. I was quiet for a minute. Finally, I said, "Sure." She thanked me. I told her I had an idea. She could move into the small, run-down cottage on the property near the shop. "Are you serious?" she asked. "That dump isn't big enough for the three of us." "Okay, just thought I'd offer," I told her. 2 hours later, she called back and said she would take my offer on the cottage. It only had 1 bedroom, 1 bath, a tiny kitchen, and a small living room. I wasn't sure how the three of them would manage, but it wasn't my problem. 2 weeks later, I moved into the main house, my parents' old house. I immediately started remodeling. I wanted to remove the negativity of my family from my house. Over the winter, I remodeled the kitchen and 2 bathrooms. That spring, I had a buddy in the swimming pool business build me a pool. It was on the side yard overlooking the grounds and the tiny cottage my family lived in. Every time they walked out their door, they saw my large house with my swimming pool. That spring, as I drove up to my house, I saw Taylor sitting in his wheelchair in the small side yard of the run-down cottage. Normally, I would ignore him, but this time I stopped, got out of the truck, and went over to him. "Taylor," I said, "I was on a job site and I was thinking of you today." He smiled up at me. Even in a wheelchair, he still believed the world revolved around him. "Oh yeah?" He smiled at me. "Yeah. I was wondering about your accident," I told him, wondering what actually happened. He took a deep breath and said there was a faulty piece of wood that broke when he stepped on it, causing him to fall. "You weren't trying to walk out to a piece of blue tape and cross a wide gap, were you?" I asked. "Yeah, as a matter of fact, I was." "Hey, how did you know that?" he asked. I just tilted my head in a gesture like, "How should I know?" and moved to go back to my truck. "You jerk!" he screamed. "You set me up! I'm calling the police! I'll get you! He cursed at me. I stopped, walked back, and squatted so I was at eye level with him. No matter what happened, there is nothing you can prove, I said. But just know this. Every time I'm at my house or up at my pool with my girlfriend, and we are swimming and having fun together, you are here living with your mom and your girlfriend in this rundown place in a wheelchair, I said with a smile. Just remember that, I said as I walked away. I guess that's the end of a long story. Val and I are still together, but it will be a while before I get married again. That's probably a whole different story by itself. Brittany did put on some weight, but I never see her at the cottage anymore. I assume she moved out. She never was very loyal. Some people think I let my mom and my brother live on my property out of the goodness of my heart. That's not quite true. I'm not that nice a guy. The real reason was payback. Most of my life I was compared to my brother. He was always better in school, more popular, and a better athlete. My mom never let me forget that. Whenever my mom praised him, it made me feel like I was in his shadow. Now it's my turn. The family business went bankrupt. Taylor's fancy truck was taken back by the bank. My ex-wife has now left town. Taylor and my mom live alone. Sometimes I walk by their house. Each time I pass, I always honk my car horn twice.